feels like all the news covers nowadays is just a new event of political violence in the US. And it is honestly like the most annoying thing to see. Like, as this is happening and there's just a new thing every day. Literally, when I was working on this script for this video, I see that there is now another shooting at a Mormon church and arson as well to the same church. I'm like, this is just getting ridiculous at this point. And to be completely honest, it feels to me like I don't even want to stay in the US anymore because of all this. Like, this is just a bunch of garbage and it's completely unacceptable. And ever since it really started to ramp up, I wanted to understand really why this is happening. So I made a few other videos where I talked about the relation with social media and the two-party system as well. But this one's just going to be primarily about this political violence. Those other two videos were really about how those, like the two-party system as well as social media, kind of create this environment of extremism we see in politics. So if you're interested in that, go check it out. But this is just how that extremism really turns into political violence, mainly. I don't think it's going to be a very long video, but I hope it makes sense and I hope it's good. So let's get into it. So I wanted to start about, when I am talking about political violence, what I mean is when a government commits violence on citizens, which thankfully we don't see too much of, citizen violence against the government, such as like a riot or whatever, and also violence between groups, which there's examples of pretty much all of those. You could say police brutality is an example of violence against citizens. You could point to riots on like January 6th and also back in 2020 as a whole, as part of that violence from citizens against the government. And then also, it seems like at every point now there's new violence from one group to another. So I only briefly touched on what I believe creates the political violence in those other videos, but I think the connection is pretty obvious. When you have, to summarize basically what I was talking about, was when you have an environment that really creates extremism. So when you have political content and it covers extreme content, you have like a ramp up in the extreme beliefs that people have, because either you have content that covers extremism, which then sort of, creates extremism in the opposite direction, because people see, oh, the people on this side are extreme, I should be, or be more extreme in order to combat that, right? And then you also have people who are just pushing ideas that are extreme to people who already are in that direction. So like if you have a left content creator who's pushing left ideas that get more and more and more progressively extreme, eventually you'll have a minority of people who watch that content eventually start adopting those ideas. So I don't think it's everybody who just watches a political video and they're all of a sudden like the most extreme person ever. That's not what happens. But what I do think happens is when you have this sort of content, it usually will radicalize at least one or two people, especially when you have an audience of millions. And if you expand that to all political content as a whole, it has a ton of viewership, right? So it only makes sense that eventually some people are going to take that in very extreme directions. And it creates this idea where eventually people start truly believing that political opponents are an enemy. And the reason this happens is, as I covered in the two-party system video, you have a tie-in of personal beliefs and political beliefs that really become one. And I think the best example of this is you have people on the right who are way more likely to be religious than people who are on the left, right? So you have that sort of tie-in between religious beliefs and political ones. So somebody who's fighting against someone's political beliefs, they see as somebody fighting against their religious ones as well. So it really does create this idea that a political opponent is an enemy, not just in a political sense, but to me as a person, that is an enemy, right? They are trying to stop my progress on what I believe makes a better society. So after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I I wanted to explore really why this is happening more. And in doing so, I really came and found that like one of the biggest contributors is that type of political content. And what I found was there was this messaging on the right that I really wasn't happy with seeing. And that messaging, to summarize, I think I talked about this more in the video where I just talked specifically about political content as a whole. But on the right, there was always this message of, now it's time for revenge. Now it's time to win. It's time to win back ground or whatever. So, for example, I have a few quotes here. I guess it's not an exact quote, but Trump was quick to blame the radical left. And a popular online platform on X posted, and this is an exact quote, "This is war," in all caps. And I don't think I need to really break down why this is a problem. It's not the radical left that did it, because it is simply somebody who probably believes what people on the radical left, as you would say, believe, right? So it's not everybody on the radical left, believe it or not, does not want to kill other people. I don't think it really takes that much thinking to really realize that. Most people do not want to kill other people. That's why there's not just murder happening all the time. And additionally, I think it's really a problem when you say that, this is now a war and it's time to win, because that's a problem. That's the exact type of messaging that creates this type of violence. Because what ends up happening is, if you might think that you say, oh, this is war, it's time to win, you might think it's time to win politically. And that's completely fair if that's the way you want to look at it. It's like, okay, now we fight back and we win politically. But not everybody's going to take it that way. As I said before, you never know who your audience is. So it's really important to sort of, look at what you're saying and think, yeah, someone's going to take this seriously, because what resulted in Charlie Kirk's assassination was probably somebody on the left saying the same exact thing. Whether it was content or not, somebody who they might have known, or maybe even this didn't happen, but I would not see it as completely unlikely that somebody who they knew or listened to online was like, yeah, Charlie Kirk's a problem, it's time we win. I could see that type of messaging leading directly into what happened to him, and that's obviously a problem. So as I kind of touched on before, political violence kind of extends from this idea that not like a person who believes the opposite of you politically is a threat to your well-being. Because what I said in another video, I don't remember exactly which one it was, but I explained when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, it became, people were saying that we can't kill people because we disagree with them. And to that, I always said, that's obviously an obvious fact, but it's important to break down why that's an obvious fact, because clearly some people aren't seeing it as an obvious fact. So I knew that it was important to kind of break down why that's the case. And what I said was, what makes something bad is that it has the intent to cause harm as well as the action of actually causing harm. So you can cause harm by accident, that doesn't make you bad. And if you have the intent to cause harm but you never really acted on it, then that's not really a problem either. You're not right for thinking that, but obviously you didn't really cause a problem, so it's not a huge deal. But what I realized later is that the problem is that you eventually reach a point where you truly believe that political opponents meet both of those requirements on what makes something bad, right? So I was saying this is sort of, again, I kind of went against what I was saying in the first place about how we just kind of take things as obvious. I kind of did the same thing, right? I said that what makes something bad is that this happens and this happens, and that's not the case with someone like Charlie Kirk, for example. I do not believe he was a bad person because he did not have the intent to cause harm, and he did not cause harm. But what ends up happening when you have this sort of messaging and content is people are like, they truly start to believe that Charlie Kirk does want to cause harm and does cause harm. And then that's where this sort of problem comes from, because they truly believe that at one point or another, them causing harm to somebody else is a greater good because they're going to cause harm to more people if they don't act. And that's really what ends up happening, and that's what creates this sort of violence. So here I have like written down just like a couple of like recent examples. So you have the assassination of Charlie Kirk, you have the Mormon church shooting that literally just happened yesterday, as you know, when I'm recording this video, and then you also have like an attack on an ICE facility, for example. So it seems like literally every day this stuff is happening, and some of the stats that I found show that there's actually a general decrease in crime as a whole in the US. What happened was, in the US, obviously when unemployment got really bad, there was a ramp up in crime. As that I suck at speaking sometimes, but as that started to die down, you saw like the statistics were starting to turn back to how it was before COVID, or like pre-2020 in general. What happened is that crime started to decrease, but what is happening is the crime that is happening tends to be political. It tends to be a political motive behind violent crime that's happening now. And I think it's kind of ironic that, like, in America, we like to, frame ourselves as, the greatest country in the world, and, we're a bastion of political freedom and freedom of speech as well. And that's just becoming less and less true every day. And it's really the political environment that has created this, as I kind of said before, because you have politicians where, things happen, but if it's on the side that they kind of agree with, they don't really treat it as much of a problem. Right? So I think of on the January 6th, I believe, January 6th, yeah. Those riots, Trump kind of took a very favorable approach to that in the side of, the people who were rioting. He didn't really be as hard on them as they could have been, and maybe you don't think they really deserved to be punished as much as they were, but, whatever. There's always a motive behind things, and then politicians sort of start to defend the people who were doing these things, right? So you have the rioters back in 2020. Biden was really light on them. You have, rioters on January 6th, and Trump was very light on them. And it ends up sort of reinforcing this type of behavior because people kind of understand, like, yeah, I might get punished for doing something like this, but if I don't end up seriously injuring anybody or killing anybody or whatever, it's not really a problem, because once the president is in who agrees with me, I'm probably fine. And that's kind of what happened in the case of the January 6th rioters, right? A lot of them were put in prison, and then Trump gets in power, he pardons them. And eventually, I think that sort of starts to mess with people's heads about, what is acceptable, right? And I think they know that they'll be punished, but I think people believe that, okay, if I do this act of violence, people who agree with me will see me as a hero. And I think that's what it's becoming, because, our politics are just so divided. That's really what's becoming of it. And, it's an alarming minority of people that are doing this, but it's happening enough, and it keeps happening, to where, people who are already predisposed to commit violent actions are becoming more and more justified in doing so. And I think that's why we're seeing it happen politically, is because of this messaging, because of, the justification of, if I do this, it's a greater good, I will be seen as a hero for doing so, and eventually, their mind is just already predisposed to that. It eventually creates this political environment that we're in now, where you just have people who really start to believe that what they're doing is right, and they are a hero for doing so, because people around them are just as extreme, or if not more, or they know people who would see them as a hero, because even if that's not the case, I don't even know if that's the case, but that's what I'm imagining happens, because there has to be some sort of explanation. I think it stems from that, greater good sort of mentality, right? About how you have politics that lead people to believe that these political ideas are a threat to them as a person. And that's literally what you see on both sides. I mean, if you spend even a little bit of time listening to it, you'll hear some of that messaging that, like, yeah, people who do and believe this are a problem. And when you say that to people over and over and over again, eventually it's gonna result in somebody doing something bad. But as I said, I couldn't really figure out what it was definitively. There's a rise in this type of violence. There's, reasons I think contribute to it, but I still don't exactly know what's even causing this. I know that's kind of an unsatisfying conclusion, but I mean, I was unsatisfied with it as well, because I really don't know why this is happening, because you don't see this in other democracies. You really don't. It's only happening here. And I know, like, some people, they want to blame certain policies or something, or, guns, for example, but I really don't think at this point banning guns or controlling them more will solve the issue. I really don't. If you want to argue for more gun control, that's fine. I think you're well within your right to do so, and I think there's plenty of reasons to want to do so. But at a certain point, it's like, do you really think that's going to help solve the problem of violence that we see? I think it could minimize it, because obviously, a gun is going to help you do more damage, but, it's hard. It's really hard to know. And I'm kind of just rambling at this point, but yeah, like I said, I truly don't know what's causing this, but I would like to explore it more. But I'm planning on moving up to another topic, so hopefully I get better at this in the future. So in case you're interested at all, if you like this video, definitely, stick around. And I'm going to be covering a lot of AI topics next. I have one video recorded that's just kind of a rant video about really why I don't like AI, but I'll get into that more as I do more research, because I'm trying to get better at doing research as a whole, scripting things so I kind of understand what to talk about, and just making these videos better. I'm doing a lot to sort of figure that out, because I'm still really new to this. So hopefully I made some sense and there's a takeaway from this, if to somebody. I don't know, but regardless, go have a good day.